Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? We're working? All right. Welcome to Cisco Live. Thank you very much for being here this week. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us, and I hope the show is working out well for you. My name's Danny McGinnis. I run product management here at Cisco for our compute business unit. So all our UCS servers, Intersight, things like that, all come out of our team. In this session, I thought we'd take a step back a little bit. We talk a lot about products at Cisco Live. Thought we'd take a little step back and talk about kind of our own AI journey and what we've been through here as a company at Cisco and how Cisco IT has kind of helped to handle that. I know you think of us as a technology provider or technology vendor, but very similar to your company, we have HR departments, IT departments, legal departments, manufacturing, supply chain, so very similar to probably what all of you have. And then we have lines of business, right? So we have everybody competing or trying to be competitive against our competition, and so trying to build the next best application. So in 2025, what's the most universal thing that pretty much everyone turns to have either that competitive edge or to drive efficiencies? It's AI, right? You can't be in 2025 and not look at AI. So anyway, we're going to take a step back and kind of talk to you about what that journey's looked like across the company. So everybody's seen these slides, right? I don't think you can be at Cisco Live or any other technology conference and not talk about how we know AI is disrupting the market. And I think when we think about what does that mean to us, right? I mean, AI is innovating at a pace or changing at a pace that we've never witnessed. I mean, this is probably the most exciting time you could be in IT in terms of the amount of change that you will face and the innovation that you will face at this moment. But, all right. Let's kind of put it in perspective. So AI or machine learning, right, it's been around for decades. I mean, we've been doing fraud detection or product recognition or making decisions inside of our Netflix accounts for years. So this has existed for quite some time. ChatGPT comes on the scene at the end of 2022, and in just 2 short years, pretty much every one of us are talking to agents on a daily basis, whether that's through help centers, on our phones. So, I mean, just think of that pace, if that puts it in perspective. Decades, 2 years. So just imagine where we'll be in 1 year, 2 years. All right, so that's complex, right? And that means that the back end is complex to us, to the ones that have to actually build it and keep it up and make it work. It's kind of like this analogy that I started using. It's like we're building a brand new car that flies, and we're also redesigning the road at the same time. That's a lot to have happen. And we really don't know where the car is going to be allowed to fly or how it's going to fly. So we're trying to figure these out at the same times too. We're rethinking everything. Power, infrastructure, cooling, new applications, what the network's going to look like, this whole brand new ecosystem that we're contending with at the same time. The thing about AI is like we tend to just say AI. And for those of you that maybe are starting to dip your toes in the water or maybe further along, is that what we're quickly recognizing that AI is not the same for everybody. It's vastly different in the terms of what it can do and what it requires. On one end of the spectrum, you have those that are actually building and training their own models. We're doing that here at Cisco. Not all of you in the enterprise will necessarily do that. And then you've got, on the other end of that, you're taking existing models, you're injecting your own data with things that we call like fine-tuning and RAG, and then ultimately we're using them with mechanisms like inferencing that we talk about. So that in itself is pretty complex, right? Because for us to understand that and properly size for it and make sure that we have the right infrastructure, there's knowledge. There's new knowledge that we have to learn and figure out. The other interesting thing is the dynamic of the personas. All of us in this room, everyone at this conference in some form or fashion has kind of been now become sitting at the center of an AI technology decision. So our traditional enterprise IT and networking teams have new sets of challenges, but now there's these new personas. There's lines of business, data scientists, AI practitioners that all have become very relevant in what this ecosystem or outcome needs to look like. And that ultimately means that there needs to be a bridge between these teams, right? There's no more, yes, we'll stand up an infrastructure environment and then they will come and be serviced on it. This is a very collaborative initiative that needs to take place in order to provide an AI outcome for a company. And so for the next few minutes here, I'm going to kind of take you on what that journey sort of looked like at Cisco. So as I mentioned, right, we have lines of business, our security line of business, my compute line of business, AppD, pretty much every product you see here comes out of a line of business. And then we've got our legal teams, our HR team. So imagine if I took this room and I divided it into these 6 quadrants. Okay, so just imagine you're kind of in groups with a handful of people, 3/3 on this side, 3/3 on this side. And imagine that we were all going to go camping for the first time. I don't know, I just picked a random hobby, camping. I've never gone camping before. I'm just going to make an assumption that none of you have gone camping before. Imagine all the things you have to learn. You have to learn how to survive outside, potentially some new survival skills. You'd have to learn how to cook, so there's things that you'd have to buy or bring with you. Sleep, probably tents you'd want to go buy, sleeping bags, it's going to be cold out there. First aid skills for kids, so that's a lot, right? We're all like trying to learn this at the same time. This group has to learn it, this group, 6 groups all learning the same thing. Imagine that's the 6 teams up here all learning the same thing at the same time. Would it be done the same throughout? No. Somebody would have a different theory on sleeping bags and tents than this team would. It's very inefficient, is the point that I'm making. There's a lot of redundancy in what we had to learn. But imagine if I create a center of excellence over here, and that team starts to figure these out, sleeping, eating, first aid, survival, and they can share that information with the whole team, and you trust them. You know it's been selected. That would actually be a lot more efficient way to get things done. And so at Cisco, our approach to this is we started to see each one of these teams each come up with their own unique AI requirement, new chatbot, new application that they want to develop. You start to realize really quickly that if we don't get some guardrails around this and start to do some unification, that this can get out of control pretty quick. We'd have very different security requirements, very different set of requirements in terms of infrastructure and how that infrastructure would be stood up. Okay, so this comes back to you. And probably one of the biggest takeaways I can share with anyone that's sitting on the IT side of the house, which most people that come to Cisco Live are. Right now, every one of those departments in your company is looking, I can guarantee with a high degree of confidence, at some level of an AI use case in their environment. Everybody. And eventually, they're going to become real enough that they're going to come your way, and you're going to have to support them. So imagine if every department in your company is coming up with its own unique architecture, its own unique security posture, its own unique set of applications, GPU requirements, et cetera, and that all gets dumped on you in the years to come. How do you operate it? How do you secure it? How do you scale it? Every one of those. You've worked so hard to unify your architecture so you could actually provide decent SLAs back to the business, we hope. And so anyway, this was really what kind of set us on the journey to say, look, we have to unify this. We have to have common centers of excellence, and we need to be able to provide this as an outcome or back to a service to all these different users and teams that require this capability. All right, so benefits, UI, why would we do this? So I think if you look at it from the financial perspective, it absolutely lowers your costs, creates an economies of scale, sets up savings in terms of like just how we staff, right? Just think about the example I used with camping. We were able to have a small team over here be beneficial to every other group in the company that did that. And so that's very similar to why you would want to unify, and frankly, how you present yourselves as becoming relevant in this conversation. This is not easy. We're going camping. I hope that our families plan, or if my family's the one that decided we're going camping, I hope they planned it that we're going to go in a few months, because it takes time to learn all of these things. This is new. So if we start to create that centralized center of excellence, which is what we did, now you can decrease the learning curve. Not everybody has to go learn the same thing. I can have a team that really understands how to build infrastructure really well, how to build security posture really well, how to choose what models and applications we want to deploy really well, and create some commonality around that. And then I think security is quickly becoming probably the most important. And last year, when we were at Cisco Live, AI, it was all about, okay, what do we do? It's exciting, it's new. Now that we're another year past, it's like, okay, cool, we got it. Everybody's on some kind of an AI trajectory, but security is quickly becoming the most important aspect and concern in terms of rolling it out at scale. And so when we think about like what did it look like for us and what does an AI-ready infrastructure look at, we kind of divided into like 4 big groups. So for us, it was one, making sure that we have what we call unified AI clusters, right? So we've got pretty much a big Ethernet fabric with NVIDIA GPUs, and these are now deployed at scales. We're up to thousands of these at this point. There's an ops element to it, right? So being able to provide pretty much what I'm sharing here is like we're getting to a common set of themes, right? So you need to have a set of infrastructure set up. Pretty much any of those AI use cases have some level of like analytics and correlation built into them that's a requirement. So now you're creating center of excellence to provide that skill rather than each of these groups trying to figure it out on their own. Chatbots. Every team, I'm going to talk to a second about our actual HR use case, but you'll see chatbots are kind of one of the most common requirements in terms of this early stage of AI that people want. Everyone wants to talk to an interface, right, or use an interface to provide human-like responses. And then lastly, service enhancement. So how can we think about like attack or a calling center, right? How do we actually do a better job of routing what your calls and what your caseloads look like? So these kind of became like a pervasive or common set of themes that we needed to start to solve for as a centralized IT group. So the thing that's important to understand about this is that it doesn't happen overnight. Similar to the example when I said, I hope my family doesn't want to go camping tomorrow because we would be in a world of trouble. This is a journey. And so, if you think about it as kind of this iterative cycle, right? You kind of have to go through this learning phase. If some of you have already been down this path, and you probably understand this, but there's a lot of research to do. Not only externally, the whole new ecosystem and set of vendors, but internally, we're trying to understand what we're actually trying to accomplish. Maybe trying to figure out, is there ROI? If we're going to invest X number of dollars, are we actually going to make some money in return on doing that investment? Is it worthwhile doing it? And then there's a planning period. So now we're getting into, the cost. What's the architecture need to look like? How long is it going to take to actually order the equipment if we want to start ordering it today, right? The problem that you start to have very quickly is that for every one of those lines of business, once they've decided that this is a real journey they're on, everybody wants it tomorrow. Well, if you haven't gone through a learning phase, and now you have an application that needs to be rolled out in a month, how can you achieve that? This is a lengthy process. And then ultimately, how are we going to use it? Not just the physical build and turning it all up, but we have to get it tested, we have to get it verified. Certainly there's a security element that we're going to want to make sure that we've achieved before we're ready to roll this out at scale. And so this takes us some time. I mean, we've been on this journey now for quite some time internally, and then it's iterative. You're constantly learning, you're constantly planning, you're constantly implementing, because there's new sets of requirements coming at you pretty much around the clock. The other thing that you'll notice is that if you're early in this journey, it doesn't stop with one application, right? It continues to ramp. Like once it kind of catches on, it sort of spreads like wildfire in terms of what the use cases need to look like and how we're going to implement. So this is sort of what one of our AI clusters look like. I didn't want to get too technical or too deep in this session, but it gets pretty complex pretty quick. So this is 32 nodes of an NVIDIA 8 GPU cluster. So this would be like our HGX boxes that we just rolled out. So just for 32 of those nodes, you basically build on a 400 gig network on the back end. So it's a non-blocking compute fabric, leaf and spine topology, and that's providing you GPU to GPU connectivity, right? And then you've got your north-south network to attach your storage, and then as well as to get your users access to it, right, through your north-south. So we always think of east-west inside the data center, but when you talk about some of these large AI networks, east-west kind of refers to GPU to GPU, and north-south starts to refer to how your users come inbound in the data center. So it gets pretty complex pretty quick if you think about the amount of infrastructure it takes to stand up just 256 GPUs. All right, so let's talk about I mentioned a bunch of different departments. Let's talk a little bit about, we call it people and communities at Cisco is essentially our HR department. So one of the applications that I was alluding to, so think of this as one of the 6 groups. This is a year ago. This is March of 24. I mean, even before then, we were creating the idea of it. But they come to Cisco IT and they're like, hey, we want to build a chatbot. We need an agent so that all Cisco employees, think about it, 100,000 Cisco employees can get access to our HR databases in a different way. We don't want them to have to search in the traditional way they've always been. We want a chatbot so they can get their questions answered and things like that. Sure, Cisco IT says, great, let's get started. What do we have in terms of infrastructure? Cisco IT says, good, we've already figured out how to build this infrastructure. We know what the stack should look like. The diagram I just showed you, that becomes your reference architecture. Rather than every team, every 6 group building their own, we've already got that figured out. Awesome. Now we're going to start moving into planning, development. This is timely. Think about this is your HR database. I mean, this is some sensitive information you have access to. What happens if I can get access to my peers' financial records? This isn't like I log into a system and we have traditional role-based access so they know, hey, Danny's only got access to Danny's stuff. This is now we're talking about a whole new set of applications go front. It gets quite complex pretty fast, and there's a lot of planning and a lot of testing and a lot of validation that goes into this. So anyway, you go through a testing and validation phase, obviously, to make sure that everything I just said works, and then general availability. That journey, and the reason I'm emphasizing this, is about a year, and we're going from March of 24. This one particular application rolls out in April of 25. So this is a real use case that Cisco has gone through with a team of people that have learned, like we've created that center of excellence to be able to do this, and you're still at this kind of timing. So anyway, I share this for you to kind of get an idea. The point that I always try to help when I'm talking to our customers and to our partners is the time is now for you to insert yourself into these conversations. You should be relevant. You should be collaborating with those lines of business, with the data scientists, with the people that have the AI projects. Because if not, it will be too late, and you will redo this journey over again. All right, so some challenges, right? Infrastructure, everything I was just talking about. We have to figure out what infrastructure we're going to buy. Network, how do we do, this is new, how do we build a lossless, low latency at this kind of speed, 400 gig network, this is intense. And then all the storage associated with it. We're getting into new types of storage requirements. But that's just like the basic stuff. Now start looking into like the data volume that we're dealing with, connecting to multiple data sources at the same time, and thinking about the security element of the users that are inferencing it, asking for it. New stacks. Do I have the right IT automation and observability capabilities so that these are 24/7 networks? There is no downtime in an agent that a global company has to interact with. Cybersecurity, is, like I said, is becoming one of the #1 concerns at this point in terms of turning up these new types of applications. Anyway, you can see some of the other things here. I mean, the point is it's endless and it requires a fair amount of planning. So this has really been a big journey for our teams. All right, so some stuff we learned a little bit along the way. So if we think about the technology side, right, it's very, very important to understand what the use case is, but more important to define it and refine it, and make sure that we have clear guidelines on what we're trying to deliver, for whom, by when. A common operating model is critical. Like I said, if we all tried to go on our own and do our own research for that camping use case, well, we're all going to do it a little bit of a different way. There is no best practice. There's no learning. This group doesn't learn from that group, and they don't share that information. Creating centers of excellence really help you to continuously learn and get better. And by the way, it's not like it's foreign. I mean, this is what you've been doing in IT for many, many decades. But now with this new kind of AI kind of shaking things up the way that it is, it's kind of the paradigm's being changed a little bit. Right-sizing the AI infrastructure is critical. There can be so much, I can't tell you how many customers I know make investments because almost there's a fear, right? I don't know how many GPUs I'm going to need. I don't know how to size. You guys have been sizing virtualized, bare metal, VDI applications. You've gotten probably so good at that you don't even think about it anymore. But this is brand new. So how do you protect your investments in a way that you don't undersize so that you can hit the performance that you need, but at the same time you don't throw money out the window by oversized boxes that frankly are really hard to get and become very expensive when that's not what you really need to support the application that you have. So that's really good, is getting good and understanding the sizing. And then on the people side, it's kind of like what I talked about, right? The learning and the skills, it's iterative. We learn, we plan, we get new requirements, we learn some more, and these all become foundational building blocks and skills that we need to have, but then we can repurpose and share. The relationship building, as I spent time talking to Cisco IT about what this journey looked like, I think the relationship building became one of the most important elements of it. The IT teams and the DevOps teams and the application owners really understanding each other and talking a common language is critical. From the customer side, I mean, most of you have been dealing, we went through, it used to be networking and security and servers and virtualization could all kind of work in their own little silos. But I'd say over the last 5 or 10 years, security, we've all kind of worked to get better together, right? We realized that that was the only way to scale and to be efficient, to be effective. And so we've done a good job within IT, I think, collaborating amongst ourselves and bringing those silos together. But now my suggestion to you is, and based out on what we've learned, is that you have to bring in the rest of the company. They're important in this decision, more than they ever have been. And frankly, this gives you an opportunity, as the IT personnel or the IT team, to insert yourself and be more relevant early on, because these are the problems that are going to come up. And so I highly recommend making this driving this awareness into your leadership teams so that you are inserting yourself earlier, not waiting for it to get thrown over the fence. All right, so I think from kind of bringing it back a little bit to my world, or on the infrastructure side, how have we kind of participated in helping out in some of these centers of excellence? So for us, it obviously starts at having a full portfolio that's ready for, the infrastructure that is ready for AI or AI-ready infrastructure. And I think you know us well enough to know we have a full lineup of switching capabilities, our own silicon, networking devices, servers, software, applications to help you modernize your data centers and be ready for the space. The one thing that I often talk about when we think about being AI ready, many of you may not even have an AI project that has started inside your environment yet. You may be thinking about it, you may be planning for it, you may be learning, you're in an event like this trying to get better education or better information. The one thing that I think you can be doing now, even if there's not a single AI use case that you have to deal with today, is thinking about what the operating model needs to look like when and if you do. So for us, we don't differentiate in the way we operate, whether it's an AI workload or a traditional workload. We just think about it as a workload. And so what we do with our management tools like Nexus Dashboard or Intersight, we very much take the mindset of a workload is a workload, but it should be universal. You shouldn't have this AI thing that hangs off in the core of your data center that is not operated to all the same levels of automation and operational efficiency that you've achieved in your traditional environment. And we'll stay true and continue to design to that. The other thing that as a company we've really worked hard at, and some of you are probably familiar with our concept of a Cisco validated design. So we spend a lot of time obviously thinking about what we want to build, what our roadmap should look like, who we want to be to you, to our customers, but then we also think about who we don't want to be, and that means that you have to think about who your ecosystem should be and who are the right partners, because clearly we're only one part of a very vast ecosystem inside the data center. And so some of the key brands obviously are the partners that you know so well. We spend a lot of time not just working on business partnerships together, but working on our technical partnerships together, with the goal of handing you a validated solution that you know works and giving you single throat to choke so that you have a place to call when you get stuck or when something goes wrong, so that we can kind of manage this on the back end. The concept of, if you don't know what a Cisco validated design, real quick, think of it as a very lengthy document, sometimes upwards of 300 pages. But what it's doing is it's being validated in a lab for months and months and then continuous maintenance. So that you know, once you get this infrastructure that you're about to order, you have an actual tested design that you can go deploy and install with automation scripts available to you, Ansible libraries, so that you can use to automate to our specs. So not only do we show you how to configure, but we show you all the performance and the testing and the validation that we did, so you kind of have that as your starting point. And then you can now do last mile customization on top of it. With AI, this has gotten even more complex. When you think about the stack, it's not just your storage, your networking, your compute, your services. Now we're getting into containers, and we're even working the way up into what that application and LLMs actually need to look like that are installed in your environment. And so for the last year and a half, we've really doubled down in terms of our solution work and our validated designs that we've done so that you have these at your fingertips to start deploying immediately. Then we took that one step further and we're like, okay, cool, it's great. We gave you this big, long document, but it's still complex, right? There's a lot of combinations. If you start thinking about this stack, right? You've got all your automation tools, you've got your storage, you've got your networking, you've got your compute, you've got your management tools. Now we get into some containers level, and now we get into actually the models that we need to roll out. This is a lot. So we've actually packaged this all up for you, and now we give you single SKUs to order. So you'll see what we call AI pods. So you have inferencing AI pods based on different things. Hey, I want to roll out I have a RAG inferencing use case for, 13 billion parameter llama model. Great. Here's a stack. This is what we recommend. We've already tested it. We've already validated it. We know it scales to this. This is what you should buy. We've done the processor selection, the memory selection, the drive selection. We've helped you choose your software stack. And it's backed up by a CVD that you know exactly how to configure this. As you get up the stack, it sort of becomes like a house of cards. There's a lot of things that all have to match at the same time in terms of firmware, in terms of architectures. And so we've really worked hard to simplify this so that you can hit the ground running and focus on the more important piece, which is making this have like an application on it ready to go for your developer community. And then the thing that we're kind of complementing that with, so after you get through that first phase, the blank canvas, where do I get started, and you roll out your first set of apps, the next questions start to happen. All right, well, how many concurrent users am I going to have in my environment? What kind of latency is tolerable in my environment? What type of GPUs do I want to have? If I'm going to train a model, is it okay if I train it in months? Or do I need to train it in a week? That really dictates the type of architecture or the hardware that you might throw at that problem. And so with that, we've been working pretty hard. This is about a year's worth of work that we're getting ready to roll out now. But it's a set of advisory tools to help you bring in intake questions and data from your environments, things you might bring to your application teams, things I would have brought to my HR team in the example that I just shared with you and say, hey, let's talk about it. How many people do you expect to be using this application simultaneously? How much data do you think we're going to need to store? And then once that happens, now I can give you better recommendations on how to properly size your environment. This is really important, kind of comes back to the example that I used earlier. And like, how do we not throw money out the door, but how do we also know that we're provisioned to sufficiently support the applications and the lines of business that are depending on you to deliver this service. So anyway, this will be available here pretty soon, probably in the next 2 months, we'll have this ready to go. So with that, if you think about what that AI stack needs to look like, right? We've got this combination of networking and compute and security, observability tools and beyond. And so I think this positions Cisco obviously really well to be able to support you and help you be ready as you start to venture a little bit more into this space. So with that, how do we take action? Be thinking about what you need, have very good conversations with your lines of business and your application owners so that you can help understand what they're going to require so that you can build an infrastructure, but think about the importance of the commonality of it. Identify your infrastructure needs. We have an AI readiness assessment. If you're interested in taking that, that's available to you today. And then make strategic decisions about your investments, right? Learn about what we've done with our validated designs and start to look at some of the sizing tools and things that we're making available to you in the months to come. And we think this really helps put you on your way to being able to be a little bit ahead of the game in terms of providing this and making you really relevant and successful in this space. So anyway, with that, thank you very much for taking the time out of this week to spend a half hour with me. It was great seeing you, and enjoy the rest of the show.